So, how to find your voice? Guys, I know I have been on this voice topic in different ways. I have really been talking about the power or the importance or the value of speaking up. And it may sound like I keep repeating myself on this topic, and you may wonder why I keep bringing this up. But what I've realized is this is a struggle that I've had for a very long time. This is a struggle that I've had since I was young. This is a struggle that I've had in my interactions with other people, within my family, within my relationships, within my friendships, within my work relationships. And I'll give you an example why this for me is very, very close to my heart, this specific topic of speaking up and finding your voice. So this is what we're talking about right now. Speaking up and finding your voice. A couple of years ago, and I've talked about this before, I got into business. Things didn't go the way they were supposed to go. And then things didn't go the way they were supposed to go because part of the reason, not because, part of the reason was I wasn't speaking up. Now, we also need to look at the fact that when you come from a background, there's very many reasons why people don't speak up, generally. So for me, it has always been maybe my background, my childhood background. I didn't really have a voice. I didn't really learn to develop the voice. So I just never used to talk. I never used to talk about how I feel. And I never used to think it was an issue until I realized when you're dealing with real life situations, if you don't learn how to speak up, it becomes a challenge. So fast forward, I'm an adult. I am running this business with these people, my business partners, and there are things happening, and I am unable to speak up. And the reason I'm unable to speak up, and I don't know if anyone can relate with me right now, the reason I'm afraid to speak up is because I am afraid that these people will get into conflict with me, or will start fighting, or I'll lose a relationship in the process. So I am not speaking up for fear that somebody is not gonna like me anymore. I'm not speaking up for fear that speaking up may bring out other things that I'm not ready to deal with. I'm also not speaking up because I am used to burying my head in the sand. So when things were happening around me that I was not happy about, I remember trying to tell one of my partners to do a couple of things, and they were like, no, they were pushing back. And every time I was like, okay. And the reason they were pushing back was genuine. They were like, okay, I just need time. They were going through their own personal issues and everything. And I was like, okay, I'll give you time. But really for me, it was an escape or a delay or a procrastination kind of tactic, because even I myself was not ready, right? So, and hence why even now as I speak about it, I've really had to really introspect at various levels and just unpeel the layers of that whole situation to also be able to unpack where I came in terms of things maybe not playing out the way they could have in a much better way. So I remember years later, guys, like 6 years later, 6 is when I was able to call out people in this situation and actually tell them the reason we are here is because of you. But I'm here. Here's the thing. I'm here calling you out 6 years later when I could have called you out the minute whatever happened. And so what if in effect happened in those 6 years is my entire life, because I didn't speak up, and because even when I tried to speak up, I was shushed or convinced that this was not the right time to speak up, and I ended up suffering for 6 years. 6 years, guys. My mental health, my physical health, and there was a ripple effect across the board in all areas of my life, my financial life, my emotional life, my spiritual life, my relational life, my family life. Like, it was chaotic, right? All because I was afraid to have conflict with this person. I was afraid to call them out. 6 years. So why this topic for me is important, of your voice, is because I recognized that because of my background, where we were not allowed to speak up to the adults in the room, we were not allowed to express ourselves. It was a very combative environment at some point. It cost me 6 years of my adulthood that I will never get back. 6 years of my sanity that I will never get back. Of course, I have my sanity now, so I'm kind of being dramatic, but I want you guys to understand the extent. It cost me my self-esteem. For the longest time, I was doubtful about my ability to make decisions, because the ripple effects that came about because of my silence and not speaking up and not using my voice to call out wrongs and ills ended up just dimming my light, taking away my shine, making me have to now start working on myself, in the sense of, now I'm telling myself, okay, Lillian, you are the best that ever is. You're God's child. You know, those affirmations you start saying because you took so long to speak up about an issue. And so now you have to self-therapize because you cannot afford therapy. So now you're therapizing yourself. If there's a word like that. So as I speak about this voicing your opinion and speaking up, I want, if you're struggling with this, I want you to pay attention. In fact, sit up and listen to me. Don't do what I did, because it can rob you of 6 years of your life. Right? So how can you, because also there's another aspect of speaking up. I don't know if you've ever witnessed, and these days I really caution people. You know, we talk about mentors. We talk about having mentors. And I remember I used to say I had this mentor. And I remember that mentor. At the time I couldn't see. You know, the way biblically we say the scales were on my eyes. You know, when Jesus healed the blind man and the scales came off. And it's almost like at that season, the scales were on my eyes and I couldn't see, right? So I had this mentor who I really looked up to. But I realized there were things that he would do or he would say that were not okay. But because he was way ahead of me in my life, in my career-wise, and I was looking up to him, I started mimicking him. So he would say, for you to be successful, you have to do A, B, C, D. And some of them were practical things that made sense, but some of them I felt were extreme. So I found that because I really wanted to succeed in life and to be this person, because please again look at it from the perspective of, I'm coming from a background of, I have not developed my voice, I am insecure, my self-esteem still even at that time was not really developed as it is maybe now later on in life. And so I'm latching onto this man's ideas and making them my own. And so I remember, in fact, I was laughing with a friend of mine another day, and I was telling them that it was so insane that I even began to dress the way he wanted me to dress. So if you meet me, generally, I'm an entrepreneur, right? And then I am a creative, full-on creative. So I do not dress in suits, and it's just not my thing. Like, I can, but it's not my comfort zone. But at that particular season, so like around like 2 years, I was always in suits. I was always in dark colors. You know, I'm always dressed colorfully. I'm always in African jewelry and things like that. And my colors can be very vibrant sometimes. But in that season, because I was taught that that is what success looks like, I changed, you know, my dressing. I even changed the way I was speaking and the things I would say. And I really began to sound like this mentor of mine. And, you know, shining the light off me, let's look at, even, I'm sure you've met people who you look at them and you're thinking, this person is a puppet of that person. And the reason we say that is because the way they talk, the way they sound is exactly like this other person, right? And what happens in such scenarios is you begin to speak like other people and you lose your voice even more. So I'm embarrassed to admit that there are times in my life where I have said things, I have believed things, and I have shared thoughts and ideas that were not mine. If you ever met me in that era, please forgive me. I may have misled you. Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is, the worst thing about it, of course now it's not bad because I'm no longer in that space, but the worst thing about it is when you're gifted in leadership. And so for me, I have always been in leadership positions in any groupings. Like, I'm not the kind of person to sit back. Like, I'm not necessarily the forefront person, but somehow I'm always in the group that is leading, right? And I guess that's where my, it follows with my entrepreneurship mannerisms. We always have to lead ourselves and things like that. But it's really sad or unfortunate when, as a leader, or as someone mature who a lot of people are looking up to you, and I've had a lot of people look up to me in my lifetime, and you are speaking somebody else's words, or you are saying things that you don't even believe. Like, I remember, let me even give you guys a story of, there's a time when I had traveled for business. I'd gone for a conference, and it was one of those conferences that if you go to, it's meant to help you grow in your business. And it did. When I came back, my business skyrocketed. It was perfect. Things went according to plan. However, sometimes you have to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. But sometimes lack of wisdom, we don't learn to separate the wheat and the chaff. So we take everything and we think everything is gospel truth, but not always. So I remember at this conference, I left that time feeling a bit uncomfortable, because we were being told that, we had really high targets. Like, we were trying to market this product, which we were running as independent distributors. And our trainers were telling us, you know what, you have to put aside everything. If you want success, if you want to live in that mansion, first of all, let me also say that, and sorry for digressing, because I know I'm digressing a bit. Success is not the same for everyone. Okay, so what is success to me may not be success for somebody else. And sometimes when we are in pursuit of success, and also depending on the background you're coming from, again, if you're coming from a place where you lack self-esteem, you don't have your self-worth, you don't know yourself, you're still trying to find yourself, it's very easy to start accepting certain ideas that are just not okay. So I remember we were being taught or being encouraged to put everything aside and pursue one thing, and that was success. Now that makes sense, especially in this personal development world that we live in, and where there are so many people on social media and on the internet talking about success, or have been speaking about success, and you want to be like them, and they say all these things and they sound amazing, but they're also somehow misleading. So I remember this person saying, forget your family, forget your friends, forget everything, and just focus on one thing and one thing only, and that is success. Now, let me just say this. We came back from that meeting, and I'm a single woman, so I don't have a husband or a boyfriend at the moment. I was not dating or anything at that time as well. And so it's very easy for me to say, I will put everything aside, and I will put everything in this business. But there are people who had families and husbands and wives, and they were also ascribing to the same thing. We all wanted to be successful. What I found out was, and I thought about it years later, like we always say, wisdom comes with hindsight. And I remember just thinking to myself and saying, wow, I feel like I was in a cult, because I came back, and I remember one of my friends, they were married then, and they were telling us, we need to make money, we need to be successful, we need to make millions of dollars and things like that. And Yeah, we did end up making money, but they ended up losing their marriage because their partner could not understand how they were putting their business in front of their marriage. And I remember thinking, those are the conversations sometimes we used to have, like, why aren't they understanding that I am running my business because of, for them, for my children. I want them to go to good school. So we must do everything. I must work 24 hours. Okay, we can't work 24 hours. I can work 16 hours a day, 40 hours a week plus. But you forget that if you do these things in isolation, something is going to suffer. And I think if you take advice from successful people who have already made it, I think it's important that you go deeper into questioning the sacrifices that they had to make before you then make the decision to take up their voice and their thinking and their thought patterns. Because if we come back and start saying, if I now say I will spend less time with my daughter because I want to be successful and whatever I'm doing is for her, you know, and then because I'm in a leadership position, I start harping that and I start talking about that and that's all I'm talking, then I'm misleading a whole generation of people behind me, and it's just not right. So yes, I've digressed. Coming back to the topic of the voice, and hopefully it makes sense. You need to begin, if you don't have your own voice and you find yourself repeating what other people are saying on social media, you see a nice post, a nice quote, and then you copy paste and you go and post on your wall. That means you don't have a voice. That means you don't have your own thinking capacity. That means you're regurgitating what other people are saying that sounds smart, but it's not your voice. That means if you're put in front of a camera one day to discuss that thing that you posted on social media, you will not be able to do it because it was somebody else's idea and not your own. And that is what has been happening, I think, for a lot of people, right? That I've interacted with. Sometimes I look at people and I'm like, this person doesn't sound authentic. I don't know if you've ever met somebody and they're talking to you and they just don't sound authentic. It sounds like they are saying something they have read somewhere, you know? When that happens, guys, what happens? You lose yourself, you lose your identity. Those are the risks. And for me, I found that because I always wanted to be seen and heard and loved and accepted and tolerated and admired and praised for whatever godforsaken reason, I found I was losing myself, and I eventually lost myself and I lost my voice. So again, why this is so important is because I want to fight for the people who have lost their voice in pursuing life and in wanting to be somebody, right? So one of the ways, and I'm going to quickly just say a couple of ways that you can begin to find your voice, your authentic voice, if you don't know how, is self-reflection. The reason for this podcast is because I felt that I self-reflected and I felt that I needed to do better, and I needed to start speaking authentically. I needed to get rid of all the belief systems that I had from other people, and I needed to begin to speak from what I believe and what is in my heart rather than what I hear other people saying. That only came because of self-reflection, and that is why this podcast is called Unafraid, because it reminds me every time I come on here and I'm on camera that I am speaking from a very unafraid position in a very authentic space. So that's number one, self-reflection. Number two is identify your strengths. Sometimes the reasons why we don't have a voice or we don't develop our voice fast enough or early enough in life is because we don't even think that we have strengths. We don't even understand that we have giftings. I always say God created all of us equally. He gave us different gifts and abilities, and it doesn't matter where you come from, but He did, right? And in so doing, you just have to sit with yourself and find out, what am I really good at? What are my strengths? And then work on those to help you develop your voice or to gain a voice. Second is embrace your weaknesses. We are not perfect. We are not perfect. Every day I wake up, I look at myself in the mirror. I have to convince myself that I am beautifully and wonderfully made. Because if I don't do that, tomorrow something will happen and I'll begin to feel like I am not beautifully and wonderfully made. So we all have our weaknesses, and it's good to accept your weaknesses And when you do, it stops you playing to the gallery, and it stops you seeking other people's opinions about how to do life, how to do love, how to do relationships. Sometimes you have the answers within you, but because you have not embraced your weaknesses, you're busy looking at other people to give you your answers. Third is look for feedback. Sometimes it's just good to share your ideas with people you trust. Not everybody, because I like to make a joke. You guys know I'm a spiritual person and I pray a lot, and I like to make a joke about monitoring spirits. I always say there are some people you don't tell them things because they're like monitoring spirits. They have this thing that they are spirits who are just like ready to pray against what it is you're doing. Anyway, that's a joke. It's serious, but it's, So seek feedback from people who care about you, who will be able to tell you the truth about yourself so that you can improve. And when you improve, you become more confident, and you're more confident to speak up and say what is exactly in your mind without fear of judgment or backlash. Another thing is express yourself, express your emotions. I used to be one of those people. I've met people who've told me that in the past, like I could be very blank and very dead. Like they can't just, sometimes things happen and I'm just like, like I'm not moved, right? And I used to be like that. I used to be very emotionless. I used to not want people to know how I feel or think, because I was protecting myself. But I realized that was also holding me back from developing my voice. You see, if you don't, like I've said before in past podcast episodes, I've said that if you don't learn to speak up, to say what you feel, how you feel, even in a relationship, for example, you're dating somebody and there are things they are doing that you're not happy with, but because you're afraid to lose them, you don't speak up, you don't express how you feel. They do something, they hurt you, you feel sad about it, but you act like it's not there. I used to do that a lot. I used to do that a lot, man. I used to do that a lot. I think, yeah. So learn to express your emotions and speak up, and then tell your story. I found that when you're able to talk about your story, there are people who don't like talking about themselves. Warranted, it's fine, it's good, you people are good. But I found that because I'm able to speak about myself in a very safe space and tell my story, I've learned to be able to embrace my story a bit more, and I've learned to be able to fight with the demons around my story a bit better. Like, before I was so scared of being judged and being looked at like, because of the things that have happened in my lifetime. I just didn't want people to think that. I wanted people to see me as perfect, as successful, as know it all, like I have everything figured it out. But telling my story allowed me to sit in my authenticity, because when I was putting up a face, I was not being authentic, so yeah, tell your story, be bold about it, right? Be unafraid. And last but not least, learn from your past. Because when you learn, you grow. And sometimes we think we are learning, but I think there's active learning and there's passive learning. And I think many of us, we are very passive learners, whereby we assume that we are learning, but there's that active learning where you're like, okay, you sit yourself down and you say, okay, based on everything that's happening around me, what can I take away from this situation, right? So the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you know, the more you have something to talk about, and the more you're able to talk about things, is the more you begin to develop your voice. We cannot all be mimicking each other. We have to be able to think and add to the conversations around us. So for example, and I finish with this, again, we've been talking about the finance bill for a long time and in our country, and a lot of the time, I must confess, in the beginning, I hadn't even read the bill, and I was just repeating what other people were saying. And sometimes I would end up thinking, okay, what I've just said doesn't sound right. And then I'd go and do research and find, oh my God, okay, what I said or what I believed was, because I was picking information from third parties, right? So for me to develop my own voice on an issue, I need to be willing to learn what the issue is about. That's basically what I'm saying, right? So guys, I hope that makes sense. That's all for now. And yeah, it's important to develop your voice. And I want to wish you guys all the best on that journey for those who are struggling. Yeah. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.